Hello, everyone. I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am joined by my partner in crime, Connor Nielsen. Connor, how are you doing today?
Ooh, spooky. I'm doing well, doing very well. Just got a nice hearty brunch, got some coffee in me, ready to talk about whatever this is. And what are we talking about, Comics Kid?
We're talking about the 1988 movie Necromancer, starring Elizabeth Keitan, and Russ Tamblyn, and a whole bunch of other people. Connor, this was your choice for us to talk about, so why don't you tell us a little bit about Necromancer?
So, Necromancer is it's a movie. So basically, there's this woman named Julianne. She or Julie, whatever. Julie. She is attacked and raped, and then she wants to get revenge. So she answers an ad in the newspaper to talk to a witch, and then the witch takes the form of Julie to go and kill all of these men in her life that she is angry with. That includes the rapists, but then also includes other people. Um, so this is a Twin Peaks podcast. I picked this based on the connection of the actor Ed Wright, who played the elderly bank teller in the final episode of the original series of Twin Peaks. There must have been a glitch in the Matrix because that actor is not in this movie.
No.
When I looked on Letterboxd, that elderly man's face was in the little cast, and it said Ed Wright. I'm like, oh, okay. So Edward A. Wright is an actor in this movie, but it's a different Ed Wright that the internet website Letterboxd.com mistaken as a Lynch, bit player who appeared in a few of Lynch's movies. He's not in this movie, but luckily Russ Tamblyn came in clutch for us. So can still be this isn't a fraudulent Twin Peaks pick. So, anyways, Comics Kid, what did you think of Necromancer?
Well, before I say that, you had said that the cast had like Russ Tamblyn like way down at the bottom, and I was kind of relieved, I guess, whenever like you get a little cold open in the movie, and then it starts putting the cast up like on the credits, and it's Elizabeth Keitan and then Russ Tamblyn. And then it doesn't have any other cast information. And Russ Tamblyn, it's not that he has just like it's more than Django, right? Or it's more than Mike, Bobby's friend Mike, in that episode of 6 Feet Under. It's more than that, but he's not exactly a main character. Like I would say, like there's 3 or 4 actors I would say who are play more of a part in the movie than him. But for some reason, it just casts those two, and then you just jump right in with like directed by, written by, etc. I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. It's one of those things like I watched it for free on Roku. You said you watched it for free on Amazon Prime. If I had had to pay money for it, I might have been a little more disappointed, but I enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty entertaining. There are a few, if I had to, and I will cast my critical eye on it, there are a few things I could say that maybe the movie fumbled a little bit, but overall, I enjoyed this movie. I am kind of surprised that it's like as unknown as it is. It like does not have any trivia on Internet Movie Database. I went and looked because I like to, after I watch a movie, I like to read up on it, and I'm like, oh, no trivia at all. And then I go to TV Tropes, a website I used to frequent quite a bit in my youth, and they don't even have a page for this movie at all. And so this movie is kind of like, I won't say a sleeper hit, but it was a sleeper. We'll say that, like a sleeper movie that came out. But I enjoyed myself. Connor, what did you think of it?
I have no idea what this is. I did I enjoy myself watching this? Kind of. So this feels like something that Red Letter Media would watch on Best of the Worst. That's the best way I would describe this. Now, I don't think this is going to be one of the movies that they will destroy. I don't think that this is going to win Best of the Worst, but it scratched a few of those itches that was and entertaining in terms of what I look for in a solid B movie. But I would say on the whole, I'm not going to remember this very well, and I think the movie itself is pretty awful. but I also think that's kind of what it's going for. So like it's trying to, it knows its market and it knows its audience, and it's only looking to make a quick buck there. It's hustling. I can kind of respect that. But I was kind of entertained throughout it, and it had some low budget movie charms. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Looking it up on Letterboxd, it seems you enjoyed this about as much as most people did. This has regularly like 3 and 3.5 star ratings from most of the reviews I'm seeing. So, where do you want to start with this?
So I guess I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but this is basically, it's like a rape revenge movie that also has like a sorcery horror element to it. And, the rape revenge subgenre is not one that I particularly want to become acquainted with. Like I've never watched Straw Dogs, and I like, it may be a fantastically executed movie, but that's not the kind of thing that I really enjoy watching. And so I don't want to, whenever we say like this in the first like 10 minutes of the movie, a woman gets raped, and that's not, when I say I enjoyed the movie, that's not the part that I enjoyed. But I was pleasantly surprised that the movie, that's obviously the inciting incident that kind of kicks off the rest of the plot, but then it doesn't just forget that. Like she has now I've never been involved in a conversation where someone is struggling with the aftermath of being sexually assaulted, but I feel like this feels like a very honest aftermath of that. Like after it happens, she goes to her friend and they have what feels like a pretty real, genuine scene. And then like she tries to tell her boyfriend, and her boyfriend is kind of awful, but he doesn't intend to be awful. He could probably just shut up and listen to her, but he's kind of like talking over her and saying like, "Hey, our band is doing great. We'll be able to move into our own house." And so she's not able to tell him what happened, and she feels so alone right there. And I'm like, this feels real. It doesn't, you mentioned Best of the Worst. We're both really big fans of Red Letter Media, and quite often in their, especially like in their action adventure movies that they watch, it seems like they'll like, let's have a woman get raped so we can have a little bit of nudity, and that'll get more people in the seats. And then it seems like that's their only reason for having it. But this doesn't feel quite as exploitative. Like it still feels like a character here, and she doesn't just feel like she's just there to take her clothes off so that we can get horny teenagers to watch the movie. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I'm glad you actually brought that up, and I'm glad you were able to engage with the movie in a pretty honest way. You weren't just writing this off, maybe in a similar way that I probably was. I guess I should probably mention right here that I watched this immediately after rewatching John Carpenter's original Halloween. So there is a sort of night and day difference, I think, in terms of I really enjoyed that movie last night in a way that I hadn't before. And so I was really in the mood for watching another movie, and then I watched this, and I don't think I would be, having anyone clutch their pearls by saying this ain't no Halloween. But that being said, though, you're right. Like this is more tasteful than other films that involve rape from this time, because, like you said, a lot of people will just kind of look at it as, well, people want to see nudity. Easiest way to get nudity is just have a woman get raped. What's interesting and I guess more tasteful in this movie is that there is nudity, but it's not in that scene. It's not in the aftermath of that scene. Like there's after the incident happens, she goes into the shower, but you don't see anything, right? It allows her to keep her dignity throughout all of that. And it's not until like there's basically a demon taking her form where she's, shown to be, the more powerful entity in the situation, where she has the power and the dynamic, where we do see the nudity. And so it's a lot less, like you said, exploitative, and, it's more empowering, at least in terms of how it's shot, even though it's a demon taking her form and not actually her. But as far as like the actress in the role, I imagine she was probably a lot more comfortable in this than, say, the actresses who are just trying to get a buck and get their name out there in lower grade trash.
Yeah. And I also see I've got like my mind. You've got actual notes, so I may kind of let you like guide the conversation with what you have to say, because I have like a few bits and pieces that I will probably interject here and there, but I don't have like a direction for us to go. But yeah, I really liked how the movie, like, once it happens, I'm like, oh, okay, like because the movie starts, there's a woman goes up to this witch and she says, I want you to stop. And the witch says, have you forgotten the pain that he caused you? And she says, no, but I just want it to stop, okay? And so they go into her garage, which is covered up with this red tarp with like symbols on it. And then there's this guy with like a streak of green in his hair, and he's following them. And then the woman who is asking the witch to stop, she gets murdered by the witch. The witch is basically like, it's too late. You've already agreed to call on me for help, and so I'm going to kill you. And that opens the movie. And then we cut to Elizabeth Kaitan, and she is in the theater. I guess she's a theater major in college, and Russ Tamblyn is her professor, and they are going to be doing a play of Romeo and Juliet. And you find out she at one time had an affair with him, but that's no longer going on. And then you don't mind if I kind of like go over like the details here at the beginning?
Go for it.
These three guys sneak into the theater building, and they're looking for something in the professor's office. And they either didn't explain what these guys were looking for, or I missed it. But they find a love letter that she wrote him. And then they find her in a building, and that's when they rape her. And then from there, you're like, oh, okay, I know exactly which direction this movie is going. And I think a problem that I had with it is that it's one rapist, and then there's one guy who was holding her down, but he was not as into it as the rapist was. And then there was a third guy who was like at a distance watching, and he was even less into it. But we'll just call them the three guys. And they all, like an hour into the movie, they're all dead. And then I'm like, oh, well, where's the movie going to go now? And so then I feel like the movie is also asking that question of what do we do now? And so then you've got Russ Tamblyn, who at the very beginning of the movie, he invited Elizabeth Kaitan to his house. And she said, I don't think that's a good idea. And he was like, okay, that's fine. And I was getting the feeling like, okay, Russ Tamblyn is kind of playing a sleaze, but he's also got it together enough to know that no means no. And he's going to back off and say, I asked her out and she said no. And now that's the end of it. And I was kind of surprised. Slight spoilers, but there's an episode of Quantum Leap I just recently watched from season 2 where Russ Tamblyn plays a sort of sexual predator. And so like I was like, this is kind of becoming a type for him to play. But then I was kind of surprised that he kind of backs off. And then even at one point later, she says she needs to talk to him, and he says, if this is about being in the play, I would rather talk to you about it in front of the whole class. And I'm thinking like, oh, okay, like he's going out of his way to not take advantage of her. And then she tells him what happened, and he's like, well, you need to go to the police. And I'm kind of finding myself like, I'm starting to like this guy. But then all three of the rapist and his two allies, they're dead. And then the movie realizes that we need to have more victims. So suddenly Russ Tamblyn is like blackmailing her, saying like, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to give you a failing grade, and then you won't be able to get financial aid, and your whole future will be ruined. And so then we've got another victim. And then like she's frustrated with her boyfriend because he thinks that she is having an affair with the professor. And then he almost becomes a victim. And so I think the movie works when it is the witch acting through Elizabeth Kaitan is getting revenge on the three guys at the beginning. And then once it runs out of those three guys, I think the movie is stumbling for the last half hour. And it's like, well, what do we do now? And so then they have to turn Russ Tamblyn back into a villain. And then it's like, well, what do we do now? And so then it's like, well, what about the boyfriend? And this is one of those horror movies where, like, with Beetlejuice, there are clear rules. If you say his name 3 times, then you summon him. And then, if you said it 3 times again, you send him back into the model. And you kind of understand what is going on there and how to get him here and how to get rid of him. With this movie, like, what's going to happen? Like, if Elizabeth Kaitan has, like, she goes to the bank and she has like a rude bank teller that tells her off, is a naked version of Elizabeth Kaitan going to walk in and seduce him and then like kill him? Like, at which point does the witch end her spree? Like, is she just going to go on a never ending, like, I'm just going to kill every guy that she runs into? Like, because I was thinking it's a little weird that like people who are not involved with the rape are now getting, and like, I understand it with Russ Tamblyn, but then I was really confused with the boyfriend.
Yes, with the boyfriend, there's a moment earlier on where it's like they're mad. She's mad with him, and the demon lady in her form appears in the boyfriend's bed, but then they kind of make up over the phone, and then she disappears, like the witch disappears from the bed. So that was an interesting detail. I guess that was trying to like play into the rules of the movie. I didn't really
How
have anything else to say about that, but
just curious, how long was the movie on Amazon Prime?
oh, it was an hour and 28 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's how long mine was. I don't remember that scene where the witch in her form disappears. Was that close to the end, or?
Yeah, it's where they're at the it's where Elizabeth Kaitan is at the theater, and she's just getting irritated with her boyfriend, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's when like she gets the call from him, and then later after they make up, she gets a call from the last of the like the three trio, the trio of guys who were there when she was raped.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, um, but yeah, I just thought it was really weird that I don't know. It felt like the movie had a pretty solid like framework to hang itself on, and like you just have to be creative with the kills. And I would say they maybe could have done better with that too. But and then it's like, oh well, that only took like an hour. And so my suggestion, if this was one of my Friday videos, I would have said like maybe there should have been more guys present at the beginning, and then you could have had more victims later, or like I don't know. Like this could have. You don't necessarily want to say this should have been a shorter movie. Like an hour and a half is already pretty short. But I just feel like the movie is kind of like running out of things to do about an hour in.
Yeah, I can see that. I think they do a fine job, and if nothing else, I say fine job I mean of structuring it. I do think though that like this movie has more victims to play with than the average maybe not average, but some other like mysteries or whatnot. I'm thinking of there's that movie that came out several years back called The Girl on the Train, and it was just a fundamentally uninteresting mystery because there just were not enough suspects. It was
Mm-hmm.
very obvious what was going on halfway through the movie because there's like three suspects and two of them are already red herrings. So this, I think the way it structured itself was fine in terms of how you have those three guys, they get picked off, but then we need to establish that this demon is a villain, and so having the demon picking off the three guys who were, there was only one guy who raped her, but one was holding her down, and the other didn't do anything either to
Mm-hmm.
like help her. So it's like we can lump them all in as like people who deserve vengeance, but we also need to establish that this demon is a bad guy. And so even though Russ Tamblyn is maybe kind of scuzzy and, there's at least a human being in there somewhere, right? Because he is kind of comforting her and telling her to go to the police before they just need him to be a victim. So then they do that. But then they also need to have like the boyfriend, even though he's kind of absent-minded and not maybe a good boyfriend. He hasn't done anything like to harm Elizabeth Kaitan in this movie. And he maybe feels like he's the victim of like an affair or like her being a bad girlfriend. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like I get why they structured it the way they did, because watching the demon kill the rapist and his friends is like satisfying. But
Mm-hmm.
we also need them to be the villain. So now we need to have the villain kill people who maybe it's less satisfying to watch get killed.
Yeah. And I would even add, while, I'm definitely not rooting for any of these guys to survive, the ones who die. I also wish that the kills could have been a little more entertaining. Like with the first, it's not until Russ Tamblyn, which is kill number 4, that we actually see the demon's face. Up until then, it's like, oh, there's a hand. It kind of looks like a Power Rangers villain, but with a fuzzy filter, so it kind of looks I don't know, darker. And then like it will just do this like slow-mo shot where the guy is like involved in an amorous activity with her, and then suddenly the demon hand like grabs him on the back, and then he looks down in slow-mo and screams. And then you keep doing that like with each of the guys, and it's like, okay, demon hand, but that's about it. And I was kind of hoping like I think you didn't even have to have her be in this like red scaly demon form. You could have just had her be in the form of Elizabeth Kaitan and then do something horrible. Like I know you were not a fan of the 2012 Dread movie, but there's a scene in that where this telepathic woman, she's in the head of this one guy, and then basically, long story short, a guy gets his genitals chewed off in his head, in his mind, and that will live in my brain for the rest of my life. That even with a character, if he was really awful, that still I'm just like, ugh, like I instantly kind of like shudder at the thought of that. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, is that going to happen one of these guys? Because she shows up with the first guy who is not the rapist, but it was the one holding her down. She's in the shower with him, and she starts like kind of nibbling on his shoulder, and then he's like, oh, okay, yeah. And I'm thinking, oh, is she gonna like do something like demasculate him in some way, like that's gonna be really gruesome, but at the same time, like you said, really satisfying. But also, we need something because we've already seen at the very beginning of the movie, a completely unrelated woman comes to the witch and says, "I want you to stop." So it has to be something horrifying that would make probably another rape victim come and say, "Hey, stop doing that." And then we don't really get like all of our victims just disappear. Like they just complete like the one guy's in a shower, and then the next thing you know, the shower is empty, and nobody knows where he is. And then the second guy just disappears, and nobody knows where he is. And so it's not like this movie had to be rated R, right? Because of the
It is,
nudity.
yeah.
Okay, so I feel like they could have really gone a lot further with the kills. What do you think?
Well, they could have if they had like any more money. This is like made on the really, really cheap. Um,
Okay, yeah.
the effects are so small. Like there's the point where like the barbecue demon man is like eating Russ Tamblyn, and
Mm,
she walks in and sees it. The eyes are like
the
optically
CGI.
they're not CGI. It's like proto CGI.
Okay.
It's like some kind of cutout that's been like placed on the frame. I don't know, either with a computer or like they just put it on the film cell or something. But the eyes of that barbecue monster were not there on set.
Hmm.
They've been like kind of pasted on top of it. So this is really low budget.
Which is why
I
I,
think
I
it's why.
feel like I feel like they didn't have to have a demon. They could have just been evil, or a seductress, Elizabeth Kaitan. And when she shows up in like a thin nightie, it's like, oh well, that's clearly the demon. And then you just do like you could leave it up to the imagination, like that scene in Dread. It leaves a lot to the imagination, and you don't need a prosthetic and gore spilling everywhere. But you're right. Like maybe I should have been more cognizant of how little they had to work with. But I feel like even with a low budget, they could have done more in the theater of the mind than what they did.
Oh, certainly. I think there is like a little bit of over ambition, or just conceptually, like the idea of this movie sort of immediately outcosts, or like the budget. The idea outcosts any budget they had, and I think the concept probably came first, and so the idea of doing a demon and whatever that entails, that probably is how they were able to pitch it to investors at all.
Hmm.
So I don't know, but so on my notes, the first thing I have is I made a point to list the opening logos. This is one of my favorite thing to do when I watch a B movie is I love looking at all of the opening logos that I've never heard of off the top. Usually there's like 18 of them and you don't recognize any of them. But with this, there was only two. I think FilmRise is some kind of like contemporary film distributor. So I don't think that was one of the actual producers of this film, but it also had this overseas film group. I love that. Anyways, that's just one of my favorite games to play when it comes to watching B movies.
Hmm.
But I had this funny note about the cast. I think every single, or not every single, but most of the actors or most of the characters in the cast of this movie, they look like the regular person versions of like other actors that I know. So it's
Hmm.
like so Julie Elizabeth Kaitan, I could not place who she looked like. It was like part Emma Roberts, part what I imagine Angourie Rice might look like in 5 to 10 years, part Patricia Arquette from the 90s. Like it was that, you know. And then her best friend Frida looks like if you took Anya Taylor-Joy and Diana Quick from The Duelists and maybe just kind of put them together. She looks like she could be either one of those two actresses at different points, but not like them, like
Hmm.
the regular person not incredibly amazing like Hollywood beauty version of those actresses. The boyfriend looks like Bill Paxton.
Yeah. Okay.
The,
Yeah.
the rapist looks like regular person Michael Fassbender, and then Ernest looks like Tom Holland, and I could not stop laughing whenever he was on screen. Maybe he doesn't look like Tom Holland dolled up as Spider-Man. He looks like Tom Holland from like Cherry, where they're trying to make him look like a man.
Okay.
And I just kept expecting him to keep saying he was sorry and call her, Mrs. Kaitan, and all the Tom Holland isms. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought that was funny. And then there was like even one or two others where I couldn't quite place who they quite looked like. Like there's that one lady that Russ Tamblyn is sort of feeling up in his scuzzy way, and she looked kind of like the mother from How I Met Your Mother.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't know, or someone else. There's someone else she looked like that I can't quite place either. Maybe she kind of looks like what's her face from Twin Peaks, the other girl that Ronette Pulaski.
Oh yeah, the
Yes.
hair especially because
Yes.
Ronette Pulaski had like 80s hair like all over, and so yeah, this lady also had a lot of the hair too. Yeah, I didn't notice a lot of that, but yeah, I think I can kind of, as you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, that I didn't have any where I was like, oh, so and so looks like, because sometimes I'll do that. I'll call so and so die at such and such. But yeah, this time I think I agree with your synopsis on most of them. Yeah. Especially Bill Paxton. I'm surprised I didn't note that now.
Yeah, well, he's because I was like, John Travolta? No, not quite. I just watched the 1987 movie Near Dark, where Bill Paxton plays a young rowdy vampire, and he looks just like that at this time. So I was like, okay, that's it. Except instead of having long hair in this movie, he has like Bill Paxton from like the 2000s hair in 1988. So
yeah. So you mentioned her best friend, who is the one who tells her. So after Elizabeth Kaitan has gone to her friend and she's told her what's happened, then the best friend finds in a newspaper like, "Hey, have you been sexually assaulted? Come and get revenge via sorcery." And so she's like, "Hey, why don't we go to this woman?" And I think they both mostly just go there, kind of like, it'll be fun, I guess. And especially after the woman like disappears in a puff of smoke, they both they just go to drink some beers and they're kind of laughing about it. But then they go to a party and then they're like, "Oh, we're at Paul's house," and Paul was the rapist. And I was asking myself, why are you here? And then Elizabeth Kaitan said, "Well, I promised my boyfriend that," it's almost like they heard me say that. And she said, "I promised my boyfriend that I would come to listen to his music." I'm like, okay, fine. And then someone else comes and grabs best friend and says, "Hey, I have to show you something." And then we don't see her again for like another 45 minutes. Like it's in the final 10 minutes of the movie when Elizabeth Kaitan remembers that her best friend knows about the sorceress, and she says, "Hey, I need your help." And then they go to her boyfriend's house, and then the best friend is locked out and can't do anything. And so, like the whole time, I was thinking, like, if they wanted to make this a little longer, and then maybe they wouldn't have to, and maybe I'm still stuck on like the, what do you do after the 3 rapists get killed? But if they wanted to stretch the runtime a little, they could have had Elizabeth Kaitan when she wakes up in a dream. And by the way, I think they reuse a shot because the second guy who dies is the rapist, and she wakes up in a dream like, "Ah!" And then she goes to his house and she like knocking on the door, and that's where she meets Ernest. And then the third guy dies, and she wakes up from a dream and goes, "Ah!" And I'm 99% sure they just reused a shot right there. I'm not certain, but I think they did. But instead of her just like going and investigating, and she meets Ernest once, maybe twice, she could have gone and like talked to her best friend about it. But her best friend just completely disappears from most of the movie.
yes, okay. So we're tapping onto some stuff that I don't know. We're getting into now the stuff that like I just don't like about this movie. And it's par for the course, I think, when it comes to these kinds of lower budget kind of B movies, trash sort of stuff, where it's like, yeah, this is kind of maybe why I picked this movie, but because I did kind of like look at this like some low budget 80s horror movie. I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but maybe what I was hoping for was something like the 1988 Blob movie, but like just maybe not as good of a budget, but maybe a similar vibe. With this though, it's like, oh, the reality of we have $5 to make a movie, and also Russ Tamblyn is the artist in residence at our college, so let's quickly throw something together. Okay, so I don't even know, like you said quite a bit there that I don't know quite which to tap on. I think I'll start with like the ending. So
Okay.
the sequence of events is really weird because I think Elizabeth Kaitan might be the fastest runner in the history of human beings. So it's like we have a ticking clock, right?
Yeah.
There's Elizabeth Kaitan, there's her boyfriend, and then there's the demon in Elizabeth's form. I'm just going to call that the demon. So the demon is in the boyfriend's bed. The boyfriend is, Elizabeth is calling her boyfriend, and they're talking, and he's like, I don't want to talk to you, and he hangs up. And we know that the demon's there, and Elizabeth Kaitan's gotta get there. So instead of running to his dorm, she runs to her friend's house to say, best friend, we need to get to my boyfriend's dorm. So that way they run to the dorm together, and then we can have the climax. But then the friend just gets locked out. So why did we even bother going to the friend's house to like bring her along?
Mm-hmm.
Now let me tell you like what I thought was going to happen. I thought they were needing to bring the friend along to extend the runtime a little bit. But then they didn't. Like I thought like when they brought the friend over, the friend would have something to do that we can cut away to in the final act, or in the final action scene, beyond her just open the door, knock, knock, knock. Open
Guys, what's going on in there? Guys, that's about the sincerity of her line delivery, and like in hard cut to like fire and brimstone inside the room, and like both Elizabeth Kaitans are like choking each other. It's my dream come true, and then back outside, and she's like, "Come on, open the door, come on, guys!" And it had to be on purpose. Like they're kind of playing with us a little bit, but still, why like you said, why even bring her along?
Yeah, I thought like they were bringing her along so we could cut to her. She's out in the hallway doing some kind of ritual to maybe weaken the demon or like something like that. But they didn't even have her do that. It's like, why did they even bring her along? But then I also figured, okay, we established earlier that the only, like, Ernest tells Elizabeth Kaitan, you can only kill the demon when she's in your form, and you just got to do it, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so we can only kill the villain when she looks exactly like our actress. I just immediately right there was like, okay, so the ending is going to be this, hooray, the day was saved and evil didn't win. And then like Elizabeth Kaitan will like look over at the camera, and then it'll freeze frame, and then her eyes are going to glow, and then it'll zoom in. I thought that's where we were going.
I thought so too. I thought
no, it just stopped.
Yeah. Well, I thought they were all gonna be like, oh, at least it's over now. And a boyfriend hugs her, and then her eyes turn green, and she like starts to nibble his shoulder, because she does that, I think, with all of them except for the third guy. We don't see what happens with Russ Tamblyn a whole lot, but she shoulder nibbling was like her go-to move, and so I thought, oh, it's gonna like there's a Vincent Price movie, I think from the 50s, where something kind of like that happens. And so I was like, I too was thinking that was going to happen. That would have been great. But, or at least, I feel like that would have been more memorable than what they did. They hard cut away from Elizabeth Kaitan, and then we cut back to the witch's house, and the lights are on inside, and you hear a laugh, and then a shadow walks across the window. So I guess the witch is still alive. But
Elizabeth Kaitan's also alive.
Yeah. And that's where, have you ever seen the 1979 movie Phantasm?
I have not.
Okay, no spoilers, but I watched that, might have been last year. And I don't understand why that movie is a cult classic. I did not enjoy Phantasm. I won't get into like the details, because honestly, a lot of it I just don't remember. But I remember really not liking that movie. But I looked into it, and Phantasm came out in '79, and then the next movie came out in '88, and then there was Phantasm 3 in '94. Phantasm 4 in '98, and then 2016 had Phantasm Ravager. So this movie, Necromancer, came out like right around the same time that Phantasm 2 did, and I haven't looked into it, but I have a feeling that Phantasm 2, I'm looking at it. It looks like there's a whole bunch. There's a couple of recurring cast characters, but it looks like it's a new cast. And I feel like they were thinking with Necromancer, this could be our version of Phantasm, where you like Necromancer 2 will be a different, like, it might not necessarily have to be sexual assault. Maybe, some guys rob a bank and the bank manager is going to lose his job, and then he, calls on the witch. And like the witch would be like your through line through the Necromancer franchise. And that's kind of similar, I guess, to like all the other like Friday the 13th and like the Halloween movies kind of do that, where you'll have some recurring characters, but basically it's just Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. And like, I was wondering if that was kind of like the end of this was like, yeah, you guys want to see Necromancer 2? Like, she'll show up again in some other situation. But in that case, if they were to do that, I feel like they would really have to get very creative with the kills and have like a different scenario that warrants the summoning of this witch in each movie. Because I wouldn't want this to just be Sexual Assault, the series. I would want it to be something different if you did another one.
Right.
But that's the only thing I can think of like why we hinted that she's still alive at the end.
Yeah, classic sequel bait. Well, that kind of thing like is maybe just par for the course when you get to these kind of things. Everyone's wanting to make the next horror franchise. This one kind of playing into maybe like a sort of satanic panic element, although not as much as I was kind of hoping, because it's like the boyfriend's in a hard rock heavy metal band. I was maybe hoping to tie that to the sort of satanic imagery that was going around at the time with, heavy metals, like the devil's music type stuff. But with this, though, like, yeah, that kind of sequel bait ending is obviously there to maybe go, but it also just makes the entire, I think, ending feel useless. Because, like, okay, I guess the demon's not going to stop coming, but
yeah,
what? Like,
or is the demon, because the movie was not very clear. Like I said, like with Beetlejuice, you pretty much what's going on, how everything happens. But here, like when we see Elizabeth Kaitan like show up in the shower of the first guy she kills, is that a demon summoned from hell by the witch, or is that the witch wearing an Elizabeth Kaitan skin, and then the witch is actually the demon also? Like the witch is just another skin that she wears, because if she gets killed at the end and then the witch is still alive, then that makes me think, okay, this thing that's been killing is just a demon that works for her. And so maybe they could say, well, the demon gets killed, but the witch is still alive.
So I got a theory.
Okay.
I think whoever made this movie is a fan of comic books.
Oh.
Because the witch looks like the Scarlet Witch.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, she has like it's not like the exact kind of headdress, but she's got like red in her hair and she wears all red, and it kind of has like a bit of a Scarlet Witch look. And Ernest looks like a comic book character in his design, where he just has like this red t-shirt that has a pentagram on it. Now I can see in my head what that looks like on the comic book page, but when you see it in real life, it just kind of looks dorky and kind of funny to me. But
well, that's Ernest. the whole time that
this is the weirdest Jim Varney origin story.
Every time he showed up, I was just thinking, like, what are you doing here? Like, and he at one point there, it's when Elizabeth Kaitan and her friend are going to the witch and saying like, yeah, sure, let's do this. Their car is parked outside her house, and he like walks by their car and like looks inside, and he sees a notebook. And then later we see them get back in their car, and I was thinking, oh, did he steal their notebook? And I don't think so. I think he noticed like her name on the notebook, and then somehow that was how he was able to track her down. Although I don't think she had like her first and last name and social security number and address like on that book. I think it was just like Julie's diary or something. But the whole time he shows up, I just don't really get what he's here for. Like at the very beginning, he brings his bicycle and he's parked it outside the witch's house, and he's listening while she kills a woman with an axe. And then the witch comes out and she says, hello, Ernest. And then she makes his bicycle disappear for some reason. And then he's like just showing up at different points. Like he wants to learn witchcraft, but he also wants to help Elizabeth Kaitan stop the witch. And then the witch like shows up and she kills him and says like, am I not beautiful enough for you? So then that makes me think, okay, maybe he had like summoned her at one point, in which case he should probably, like, some of his people should be dying also, right? Like, or can the witch only have one client at a time? I don't know. But this was another instance where I feel like they were just trying to stretch the runtime because I didn't really know what his purpose was here.
I didn't either. It's odd. I didn't know if he was supposed to be like this false ally, because as you're watching it, he seems to be this kind of guy who's like snooping around the witch, and then you think, oh, well, maybe he's in league with the witch, but maybe he's somebody who wants to sort of, he's a hopeful student of witchcraft. But then it becomes weird because it seems like he wants to help Elizabeth Caitan, be an ally to her, but then he's also like reading rhymes and like lighting candles and all these other kind of witchy things. And so I'm thinking, okay, is he helping Elizabeth Caitan just to trick her? Is that what we're doing here? Or what's really going on? And it seems to be he does want to practice witchcraft, but he also has a crush on Elizabeth Caitan. Who can blame him? But then, like, I don't know. It's a little ill-defined, and we spend so much time with him. We keep cutting away to him, but then at the end of the day, like the only useful piece of information that he ever exposits is simply you can kill the witch by killing. You can only kill her when she's about to do her murderous deeds in your form. And that's kind of it. Like, what else does he say that really like affects any kind of? Because that's like the only kind of rules we get in terms of how this all works.
Now, did he tell that to Elizabeth Caitan, or did he? Because at one point she shows up at his house and he shows her this dagger that he made, and then it turns out that that's actually the witch in disguise. So did he say that to Elizabeth Caitan, or did he say it to the witch, thinking it was Elizabeth Caitan?
He said it to Elizabeth Caitan. It's when she goes to Michael Fassbender's house, and he
Okay,
after
yeah.
he's been killed, and he's just in the backyard and kind of creepily talking to her. So that's where I think he says that. And then later he does talk about you can kill her. I've got this knife here. Do it with this knife, and then that's when it's revealed that that's actually the witch.
Okay, yeah. Um, I would say, and I don't. If you have more to say, we can keep going. But I feel like this is a movie that, like, on paper, I'm like, yeah, I think it works. But then, like, when we talk about the little bits and pieces, it's like this was really weird and this was really weird. Like, I'm wondering if it's a situation like the best friend was like, you've only got me for like 3 days of shooting, and so they're like, okay, how about you're at the very beginning and then you're at the very end. But like, I don't know. Maybe she was available and they were just like very sloppy with how to use this character. And there's like little things like that where I'm just like, overall, I get what the movie is doing, but then when you zoom in, that's when I'm starting to question things.
Right. Okay. Um, I think I agree with you, but I don't think I like the material as much as you do.
Hmm.
And maybe it is just a matter of I was really not swallowing the production of it right off the bat. Again, you have to keep in mind I just watched Halloween immediately before watching this, which I think was made for a similarly small budget, and that you know not all movies can be shot by Dean Cundey, right? Not all
Hmm.
films can be directed by John Carpenter. They had no money to work with, but darn it, there's a reason why they went on to become, masters of their craft. Because
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, they already were. Um, when it comes to this, though, there was a fun sense of discovery in terms of like maybe that's a bit cheeky on my part, but it starts off and I'm like, are there any scenes that are not going to be taking place at this community college? And then all of a sudden, like I'm reframing, like, so what is this? Is this like I'm a college student who likes comic books and like I want to make like a rape revenge thing with witches and kind of comic booky stuff, but I have like a $5 budget and also Russ Tamblyn is our artist in residence, so let's see if we can rope him into this too. Like that's the thing I was kind of paying attention to because the inciting incident was so ludicrous to me. The way the rape happens was like it took like two or three leaps in logic.
Hmm.
So what we get is we have these three people and we just see their silhouettes come down a hill and then they put on some masks and they're like, okay, let's go do this. And you think, okay, they're probably going to go rob a liquor store
Hmm.
or rob some kind of shop that's closed or something, maybe even a bank. But no, they go into a college, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. Okay, and they're there to rob. No, they're just there to sneak into a professor's office and try to get test scores, or like
Okay.
like the answer key to tests, so that they can like cheat on the test and maybe give them to friends. And because later in the movie you have that one guy walk up to the third
Mm-hmm.
guy who hasn't been killed yet. They're like, hey, when am I going to get those test results? Like, I really need those answer keys.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing in the first place. And then Michael Fassbender sees Elizabeth Kaitan's picture and is like, oh man, Russ Tamblin's getting some of that. I got to get some of that. And then it just happens that Elizabeth Kaitan's character, Julie, is there. He knows that that's the Julie who, it could have been another Julie, but I guess the picture's there. Never mind. But like, it just happens that the girl's right there. And he just cannot help himself. He's just got to rape her. And so you get this huge, long chase scene where they're all like chasing her around. And okay, before we even get to that, she's leaving the building. And then she sees the kind of heavier set one who has like a pig mask. And she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, nothing. And then she's like, well, you might as well get out of here. The security guard. It's like they could have just let her go and they'd be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then they need to corner her. They just have to corner her. Why are any one of these guys, except for Michael Fassbender, cornering her because he wants to rape her? Neither of them want to do that to her. So why are they doing it? Like, what's happening? And then you get this really, really long chase scene through the theater department while I was watching it, I'm thinking, so does this guy want to rape her? If he does, well, why does he want to do that? Wouldn't you want to like get away? Like you were like doing it the best you could to be like secretive and sleuthy just to get out. And like, if like, it'd be one thing, like if I was like doing like your Friday videos of like how to fix Necromancer,
Mm-hmm.
I would make it so like these guys knew she was going to be there and one of them wanted to rape her and somehow like convinced his other two friends to come along with him. They didn't know why they were there. But one of the guys went there for the sole purpose of trying to rape her. Now that makes him even more morally reprehensible than he is.
Mm-hmm.
But like at the very least, there's motivation there. This one just feels like, oh, hey, this hot chick's also here. Why not? I'm going to rape her.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to come out of nowhere. And like that intention is only revealed after this extended chase scene. And while I'm watching it, I have no idea what he's even doing. Is he just chasing her to scare her and then eventually wag it in her face that he saw her love note? And then he's like maybe going to try to blackmail her so that she can do something else for him. Maybe it is. Maybe he wants to rape her. Maybe he's just trying to play a trick on her. Maybe it's innocent. Maybe it's not. I haven't. So like, it's a long, long chase scene, almost as long as I've been talking. And and then like the result is just sort of this like awkward rape scene where the other guy's like, nah, man, I'm not into it. And it's like, then like, I don't know. Like I wasn't around the 80s. I don't have horrible like friends and I have more of a spine than this guy. Apparently I wouldn't put up with that. Maybe not everyone else will. And maybe that's the point that the movie's trying to make is that, you know, people who turn a blind eye and I didn't do nothing are, you know, a part of the problem. And I would say so. But as far as like these characters doing these actions, I was just confused where they were all coming from.
Yeah. And you know, you're right. Like I once he said like when they found the note and he was like, I wouldn't mind getting some of that too. And I was like, oh, this is where we're going. I just kind of was like I kind of threw my hands in the air and was like, well, this is what the movie is, so you know, this is what's gonna happen. Like you're right. Like it is weird the sequence of events and how it happens. And like if that's what you have to have happen, then there are better ways that it could have happened. You're absolutely right about that.
Um, the other thing is that there were just certain aspects about like, you know, it is trying to like we were talking about earlier, like this has more dignity to it than a normal scuzzy, you know, exploitative rape revenge movie. But it also does, I think, relish a little bit of the scuzziness. Like when Russ Tamblyn is like trying to give that one actress breathing lessons and he's just rubbing his hands all over her and groping her. I had like my hands on my temples and was like rubbing my head. I'm like, what is this? like what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
and then later when Elizabeth Kaitan is fighting Elizabeth Kaitan, I was like actually laughing at that point because it was. Have you ever seen the Tommy Wiseau Hulu series The Neighbors?
No. I didn't even know he
Okay,
did anything other than The Room.
well, don't watch it because
Oh,
it is truly, truly awful. But he plays two characters in that show, and the last episode, like that I watched, there's like a scene where Tommy Wiseau's character meets the other Tommy Wiseau character, and they like hug, and it's like the most awkward thing ever because it's clear that they had to like have a stand-in playing like his shoulder and back of his head for like, depending on what close-up it was. So it'll be like him in one costume hugging his stand-in in his other costume, and then he'll do the reverse shot, and it's like this super awkward hugging scene. And this was like that, except it was a fight scene. And I just like I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was funny.
they should have gotten Neil Breen, just have him wear a wig and because that whole thing you're describing, I'm like, this sounds like that Neil Breen movie where he's twins and they're different. I don't even remember what that one was called, but yeah, that I will say this movie did a pretty good job with the two Caetans, like, or maybe you don't think so, but at no point was I saying to myself, oh, that's clearly a stunt double in a wig. Like, I when I was watching it, I was immersed in that scene.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were. And it's not like a terribly awfully fake wig. It's just like the angle is the back of her head, like half of the back of her head and her shoulder. And that's all you see. It's like we are not going to move this hardly at all. But also just kind of like the choreography is just them kind of awkwardly fumbling around and rolling around. And I get it. It's a low budget movie. They don't have the money to like make this awesome fight scene. But I don't know. I laughed at it, of course, but I will say I found that charming. That's the kind of stuff I was looking for when I picked this kind of a movie. I do enjoy those sorts of low budget charms.
Yeah, I think I do too. Apparently, Elizabeth Kaitan was in one of the Friday the 13th movies, the one with the girl with telepathic powers. I have seen that one, but I don't remember her from it. But that was one, I think there was like a party going on with like 8 or 9 like teenagers at a house. And so she could have been any number of them. And I wouldn't remember which one she played. But that's probably the only other thing I've seen her in.
Okay. Yeah, I actually thought she was pretty good in terms of
Hmm.
like giving a performance. I wouldn't mind like seeking out other stuff that she's in because I've seen like other, like horror movies from this era where they just probably cast this person in the lead because it's the most attractive person they could find. And I've seen them give a whole heck of a lot worse performances than she does in this.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think she did really good with the material. There was one bit before we close her down. There was one bit I wanted to talk about. So the before the first kill is the guy who was holding her down. He is shaving, and we find out he is getting ready for a date with his girlfriend. Well, then she calls him, and she is in bed under some covers, but she's clearly disrobed, and she is with the rapist. And she is calling her boyfriend and says, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I don't remember what her excuse is. Like, I have a headache or something like that. And then, because earlier, the rapist, we find out that he deals drugs on the side. And then he's got a plate full of cocaine, and he lets the girl do a line of it while she's telling her boyfriend, no, I'm canceling the date. And then, like, she hangs up the phone, and then they start, like, hugging and kissing, and they fall back on the bed. Well, then the next time we see them, she's in bed with him, and she's just like, and she like gets out and she swears at him, and he's like, oh, what happened? And she's like, I know what's going on here. You just wanted to use me. And like, so that I don't remember exactly. She's like, you just wanted to have sex with me is basically what she said. And I'm thinking like, yeah, like, didn't you, did you notice that when you two start, like when you were naked and you were telling your boyfriend you were canceling and like, you started like making out with him, like on, like, why did it take you that long to figure that out? And he's like, I don't know, like I don't like the rapist character, but I kind of in that moment I was like, he probably was thinking like, yeah, that's what we were doing. Like I thought we had an understanding, but
Sorry, honey. It was the Coke talking, not me.
yeah,
I
yeah,
actually did want to go on a date with you.
yeah. I thought, and then I think that's like she leaves, and then like 10 seconds later, Elizabeth Kaitan comes in, and then like all of them are kind of like, oh yeah. And I'm thinking like at least one of these guys should be a little suspicious. Like the heavier set guy, he was on the phone with her where she said like you didn't do anything to try to stop it. And then the next thing he knows, he puts on a movie to watch, and then she comes in kind of wearing something similar to what the woman in the movie that he's watching is wearing. And then he's just kind of like, oh. And I feel like at least one of them should have been like, wait a minute, she's really upset with us. Why is she here? You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
none of them seem to be using their brains at all in that situation.
Yes. I agree.
Uh,
Another point I wanted to bring up before we headed out is like I feel like this was written to not be about college students, but then it was made by college students, so they had no other choice. Because it's weird how the boyfriend is like he looks like he's 40, he's in a band, and then also he only lives in a dorm.
yeah.
And then also like Michael Fassbender is like this hotshot music producer who lives in like a mansion, and he's like, I can get away with anything because I'm this guy who can get coke and I can score and I produce music labels. Also, I need to make sure I know what the answers to the tests are so I can pass the class. And it's like, wait a minute. At one point, he's like Michael, or like, Michael Douglas. He's like Gordon Gecko. Like he's like this hotshot high roller, but he's also like got to make sure he doesn't fail the test or something. Like it was weird. It felt like again too ambitious for like you wrote this thing, but in terms of like it's not like ambition in terms of budget. It's like, all right, my imagination is that I'm in my mid 30s when actually I'm in my late teens, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe right for your situation, maybe a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, the mansion that the main rapist lives in, that especially, it's just huge. It's like, bigger than some like buildings like where businesses, like, there are
Yeah.
grocery stores smaller than that building. And like because they mentioned that his mom is on the board like for if you are to file a complaint against a student, that his mom was on the board for that. And so it's like, okay, well, and like, he comes from a pretty powerful family, like in this town or whatever. But then, like, I don't think his parents live at that house because we never see them at any point whenever they're having the party there. And then when she goes to try and find him after he dies, nobody answers the door. So it's like, yeah, this college student, I guess, just has his own house that his parents gave him, I guess.
Evidently so. It's not just that like he doesn't strike me just as like a rich kid. That's what like the heavier set one strikes me as, because it looks like he lives in his own house and it just kind of looks like a bachelor pad.
Yeah.
That guy almost looks like he's like a music producer, high roller type who doesn't just have, mommy's money. And it's just, I don't know, that was kind of funny.
Uh-huh.
Also his death scene made me laugh out loud. It was hilarious.
The rich kid, the heavy set guy, or the other one?
The rapist.
Okay, yeah.
Like when the monster is like gonna go down on him, then you see like these like barbecue fingers like on him, and then
Yeah.
he looks down, and then it's like this slow mo, and then, like you see it from like three different angles, and he like looks straight up, and he's like, oh, like that was pretty funny, and then it
Yeah.
results in like wake up from a dream.
Also, did you notice? I think it's with the Russ Tamblyn death. For some reason, like the bathroom. Well, okay, so after the first guy dies, like just like ounces and ounces of blood like shoots up from the drain of the bathroom, and he was killed in the bathroom. And then that just happens. And then like later with the Russ Tamblyn death, like the shower head is like moving around. And then it starts spewing blood out, and then there's like something is like trying to emerge from the wall, and then like the Elizabeth Kaitan demon just comes in, and I was thinking like, does there have to be some weird thing going on with the bathroom in order for the demon to emerge, or is this just like we haven't had enough spooky stuff in this movie, so why don't we do something like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Why is it always a bathroom, I wonder?
I guess that's where men are at their most sexually vulnerable, I guess.
I guess so. Bathrooms are like fireplaces.
Yeah, like
Somehow. I don't
it's,
know.
it's
That's
like
that's where Russ Tamblyn got it. Was right in front of the fireplace.
yeah. Um, so that did you have anything else to say about this movie?
No. I'm glad you enjoyed it more than I did. I kind of got what I was looking for out of this, but it was also like I was watching this really late. I got pretty tired, and I was ready for this to be over by the time it was done.
I understand that, yeah. And it's one of those I kind of wish that it was like more well known, but at the same time, like when I was talking about like Phantasm has like 4 sequels, and even people who like Phantasm, I don't think like any of those sequels. I am glad that we don't live in the timeline where we had like Necromancer 5, where like Elizabeth Kaitan comes in for like one scene to like talk to the main character and then leaves.
Right.
I'm fine. I'm fine with this being just a movie of the '80s that most people don't know about.
Me too. It should be said. So when you watched it, it was in 4:3, right? Like
Yes.
aspect ratio.
Yeah.
Okay. Vinegar Syndrome, the boutique Blu-ray label that just takes the lowest quality trash in the world and makes it look stellar.
Hmm.
They put out a Blu-ray of this, and it
Oh.
does look next level good. Like I didn't think it was possible to make this look that good, and it's in like a different aspect ratio that's like 16:9, and
You
it
can
was just kind of
actually
like
you can actually smell the brimstone when the demon shows up.
yeah. I saw like a review on Letterboxd where someone said Vinegar Syndrome cleaned this up so well I can actually see the string holding the axe in the opening scene.
Ah!
So
Yeah. Um, well, that's something for me to consider then.
yeah. What are you picking next time?
All right, I am picking a movie. I don't think that we have done a Twin Peaks connection with David Bowie, have we?
Oh goodness, I don't know if we have or not.
I can't remember us doing one, and I had to double check on a certain media library that I have access to make sure that you also have access to this. But we are going to talk about The Prestige, Connor, a movie that you have vaguely referenced before in certain rants, but now we will get to since it's going to be spoilers ahoy on that thing. You will get to uncloak any vague references to a certain rant. You'll be able to just bust it out, and we'll be able to finally talk about it. This is a movie I think we both. Well, we'll just talk about it the next time we talk about it. But that's what we're going to be talking about next time.
Thank you so much for picking this. I've been wanting to pick this for so long, but
Mhm.
every time it gets to be like my chance to pick something, it just evaporates from my brain on the spot, and then a day will pass, and I'll think, "Oh man, I wish I would have picked The Prestige." But thank you so much for picking this.
I'm happy to do it. This is one of those movies. It probably took me 3 or 4 viewings before I was like, oh, I get it. So that I'm looking forward to us just really dissecting it and getting right into it. It's got a whole lot of comic book actors in it. I think like everyone is a comic book actor in it. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah,
And I mean, David Bowie's like a real life comic book character, so
yeah. So that's what we'll be talking about next time. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
I'm Connor Nielsen.
And we will see you next time for another spooky recording. Bye.
Ooh.